I've been reading a lot wine cap spawn, and the mushrooms look... Hello, welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. So I'm actually technically still on my Christmas break, but there are some things that just cannot wait, and I don't want to leave you out of the process of. So we have been growing oyster mushrooms really for not that long. These mushrooms here have only really been emerged for about a week, and they started to emerge about 4 days after I had soaked these blocks that we got from Druidry Farms. The mushrooms are ready for their first harvest. These were labeled as green oyster mushrooms. I don't know if green oyster mushrooms and blue oysters are the same, but they look relatively the same. I've got 3 blocks in here, and from what I've been told, we can re-soak these and hopefully get more successions of fruiting. These mushrooms, really, they're just the fruiting body of the mycelium that are permeating these blocks. Here you can see the white inside the bag. And yeah, these are ready to go. So there's a lot to harvest all at once. We are going to be eating some of these fresh, but I am going to put a few of these in the freeze dryer. So this is the first time I've grown anything like this, but from what I understand, we can just kind of pull up on this cluster and it will separate. That's probably a pound. Isn't that just beautiful? Look at that. So I think we had some pretty good timing on harvesting these mushrooms. This is the first time I've grown anything like this, and from what I gather, you want to harvest the oyster mushrooms before their caps really have a chance to flatten out. At that point, they're going to be dropping spores and the undersides turn a little bit darker. So I think we're good here. You can see this really pretty block of mushrooms right here. These are the pink oyster mushrooms. These guys really like warm temperatures, about 70 to 80 degrees. It's only 60 degrees in my shed right now, so they're growing a little bit slower, but they're gorgeous. I've actually been watching quite a few videos on oyster mushrooms lately, and from what I hear, you can cook the pink oyster mushrooms up and they taste like bacon. I can't wait to try that. So here we have our lovely first mushroom harvest. Each one of these clusters has to weigh a pound, I would say. And so let's say 1, 2, close to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-ish pounds right here. I don't know officially, but that's just a guesstimate. So I am going to keep one of these bigger clusters out to make omelets with, or include in our omelets with dinner. And the rest of these are going to go in the freeze dryer. So I've got to get the freeze dryer pre-cooling so that we can put these guys in. I've been reading a lot online about these guys, and it looks like possibly the more stemmy part of the mushroom maybe isn't as edible. I was gonna say maybe not, but it is quite squishy. I may freeze dry as much as I can of the cluster because I feel like that's completely palatable. Maybe over time these get a little bit hard, but these are not hard right now. Yeah, that's completely edible to me, so I'm just gonna put the whole thing on the freeze dryer trays. I am gonna break a couple of these in half because these scallop shell portions, the top, are quite broad and I don't want them to hit the heating element inside the freeze dryer. Truthfully, I was a little bit worried that we wouldn't have enough mushrooms when the mushrooms were ready to be harvested in order to fill up the freeze dryer. In order to run the freeze dryer, you really should have all of the trays filled. It messes up the computer. The computer will think that a tray is dry if it is empty, and you don't want to, underdo or under preserve the rest of the trays. But very happily, all of the mushrooms filled up the tray, and we have plenty to eat with dinner tonight. So this is incredible. This was 3 blocks of oyster mushrooms. I am re-soaking the blocks, getting them hydrated again, and then we'll see if we can get another flush. I do have over here some buckets that do have some lion's mane spawn colonizing inside. So far I haven't seen any pinning out of any of the holes. Pinning is what it's called when you start to see the first little bitty mushrooms. Very likely we will not see pinning out of every single hole. This just gives the mushroom or the mycelium the opportunity to fruit out of whatever hole they want, but nothing quite yet. I am suspicious of this little hole though. Something might be coming out of there very soon. I didn't realize it was going to rain a little bit today, but that's fine. I wanted to show you where I stuck some of the wine cap mushrooms. So the wine cap mushrooms are in this bed. This is actually hardwood mulch, and of course there's soil underneath. So I've got spawn sprinkled down in there. We've had plenty of rain, so they are well soaked in. And right here is actually where we grow our asparagus. So I did trim off last year's fronds. They're all dry and crusty and don't have anything more to offer the crowns. But I've interspersed some of the wine cap spawn over here as well. That mycelium should be able to work in symbiosis with the asparagus crowns and create a really nice relationship where when the asparagus is needing the nutrition that the mycelium can give it, it can take that up, and later on in the year when the incredible hot sun would be beating down on this bed, we have these fronds here that are the asparagus that we leave in the bed that will be shading this bed, allowing hopefully the mushrooms to go over the summer fine, and we'll hopefully be in mushrooms forever. We'll have to see. I've been in contact with Anthony, the gentleman that sent me these varying mushroom spawn. He says we should be seeing these fruit in late summer, which is around the time we're getting asparagus, or like heavily into asparagus. These guys have their own bed, so that'll be fun. I can cover this with a shade cloth should I need, but there's also this plant here, this tree, which is elderberry, and that shades this area really well as well. That's one of the problems that we have here. It's I've talked about it as a problem, then people will say full sun is never a problem. It's kind of a problem sometimes. The sun beating down as well as intense amounts of wind are kind of bad for mushrooms, but I think we're going to be able to work it out. I imagine these won't take very long to freeze dry, so I'll bring you back when they're done. I think this is the fastest that anything has freeze dried for me besides candy. This took just over 17 hours to be completely done drying. What the freeze dryer is doing right now is it's extra dry time. I have programmed it to give me, 2 or 3 hours of extra dry time beyond when the machine thinks that the food is dry, just to buy myself a little bit of time. Really, it's not a big deal if I'm not around when the cycle finishes. All it's gonna do is it'll keep the food freeze dried, and it'll actually go into a deep freeze, and everything will just kind of stay and wait for me to be ready to go ahead and unpack and bottle things up or put things in bags. When that happens, I have to re-warm the trays before I can pull them out, and if I have this extra dry time on, I get to just skip that step. So it's done. Right now the trays are at 122 degrees, which is pretty warm. And the mushrooms look exactly like they did when they went in, except for they're much lighter. I don't know if I'm going to be able to convey this properly on camera, but they essentially have, I don't know, completely dried out. Nearly styrofoam type feel and texture. Now it's time to jar them up. there's our finished product. So last night we cooked up one of those big clusters of oyster mushrooms with dinner. We were gonna put it in an omelet, but we ended up doing is kind of pan frying some extra bacon that we had from a couple breakfasts ago, putting in the mushrooms with a little bit of green onion from the garden, and then I just cracked a few eggs on top of the skillet and put the lid on and let those eggs steam. It was delicious. Now, we have had fresh mushrooms before, but nothing ever this fresh. Levi has dabbled in a tiny bit of foraging with his brother, so we have had the odd morel mushroom here and there, but even that was quite a few hours before we got to eat it. This was as fresh as it gets and incredible flavor. The great thing about the freeze dryer, it's going to lock all that flavor and nutrition in. Now, if I wanted to have these mushrooms last up to 25 years, I'd want to put them in a Mylar bag, protect them from light, but these guys are not going to last very long, not because I've stuck them in the jar, but because we're going to eat them. I got 8 of these jars, and I'll probably use 1, maybe 2 per dinner, depending on what I decide to cook, but this has been such a fun experience, so we are going to continue. I have re-soaked our blocks, and from what I've been told, we can do that around 5 times and get a harvest each time, as long as the blocks don't grow mold. So we'll be watching them and hopefully get another harvest pretty soon. Our little lion's mane mushroom that I thought might be pinning yesterday, it looks like it has started to fill that hole a little bit more, so we'll be having lion's mane soon too. And as I mentioned, sometime in the late springtime, we'll be harvesting the wine cap mushrooms out of the garden. If you've been wanting to get into mushrooms and are not exactly sure where to start, my friend Anthony with Druidry Farms has sent me these kits very graciously, and he's provided me a lot of information because I'm very new to this. He's guided me along into a beautiful harvest, and I know he'll do the same for you. I'm going to put his information in the pinned comment and in the description box below. So send him an email, tell him we sent you, and enjoy growing your mushrooms.